Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the Criminal Justice Series. Today is my pleasure to have Attorney Vera Zambrano back on the show with us. For those of you that missed our previous podcast episodes, you can look them up on our channel, or you can go to Attorney Vera Zambrano's YouTube channel, and you can find them all there. Welcome back, Vera. It's a pleasure to have you. It's been some time, right? It's been a couple months or so. So thank you for making some time.
Yes, thank you so much for joining and for giving me this opportunity to speak about more topics with you. Yes, I hope you're doing great. It's been some time, a couple of months since we talked, and yes, I'm just happy that we can get back on track.
Awesome. So without further ado, let's jump into this. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart because I understand firsthand, right, why this is so significant. And what we're talking about is kind of what types of reforms can take place within the public defender's office, right, to ensure that there's equal access to justice, right? And we're going to attack this, right? There's all kinds of cool questions that I got for you. I'd love to get your opinion on it. And just to kind of preface the conversation, right? So for those of you that don't know, under the Sixth Amendment, right, of the U.S. Constitution, someone that's accused, right, and cannot afford an attorney, they have the right to counsel, right? And there's all sorts of implications there, right? And the conversation today, because that's a pretty broad topic, but what we're looking at solutions within the public defender's office, right? Because there's some real issues there. And before we jump into it, just because, Vera, you have that unique experience and that unique perspective, right, coming from Europe, because you're an attorney here in the United States, and you're also an attorney in Germany. And then I think you mentioned at one point that if Elon Musk gets us to Mars, that you also wanted to be an attorney there as well, right?
Well, let's see if that's gonna happen.
So we'll see. And we'll have to, if you end up moving to Mars to start your, another branch over there, we'll have to do a podcast, with you, Mars. So, but
Definitely.
anyways, let's get, so jumping into this, right? So can you tell us a little bit about like in Europe, right? Or in Germany, if you want to kind of just hone in on in just Germany, is there a public defender's office? If so, what does that look like? And maybe just real briefly the pros and cons, and then we'll jump in and focus on, the U.S. system.
Yes, so when you look at especially Germany, right, there's a lot of, the criminal justice system is pretty much copied from the US. So we have a lot of principles that we adapted actually in Germany from the US. So US is a big role model when it comes to, the justice system and in general, right, especially criminal law. And we don't have an institution for public defenders, PDs. We call it PDs, public defenders, right? That's not an institution per se. So we have private attorneys that can be public defenders in certain cases, right? So that's like you have to be put on a list, actually submitted to the court, and the court has to appoint you as a public defendant. But you can still say, I'm overloaded, I'm overworked, I don't have enough capacity, I cannot take on the case. So you have the choice to actually withdraw or even not take on the case. So that's very different from the United States, right? So we don't have that institution at all. So a public defender is still a private attorney and can be a private attorney and bill as a private attorney in all other cases. And once on a time, he can be a public defender in a certain criminal law case.
And did you say if the court appoints him to be a public defender for a specific case, are they paid or is it pro bono?
It is paid. It is paid by the government, right? So the court has to pay that attorney, but it's compared to what attorneys usually bill per hours or flat fee, right? It's very little. Just in the US, it's only a fraction, right? Actually, of that of what an attorney could actually earn with a case.
Okay, perfect. So with that, Vera, let's jump into the U.S. system, right? The system of public defenders' offices, right? They have here where I'm at. I don't know. Well, Florida is huge, right? Like there's tons of offices. I'm sure here we have a couple of them, and I guess maybe I think just to set so we understand this, because I think this makes a difference during the discussion. From your experience, and I don't, from your understanding, I know that in Utah, they're set up as private entities. So they're nonprofits, so they don't actually belong to the government. The government does not run them, if you will, right? They just provide funding for them. Is that, from what your understanding, is it the same in Florida? Is it the same across the nation?
Yes, it is the same. It is like a completely independent office, right? They are not attached to the state attorney's office or the courts or any other, a party that is in the criminal justice system per se. So they're completely independent, and they have to be loyal to their client, to the defendant, and no one else, right? So they're pretty much independent. So it guarantees at least that they have no political interest or right, no other interests in when they represent their clients.
Right, right. Now, when people talk about, kind of the issues with public defenders' offices, right, the big thing that comes up is funding, funding and the quality of the service that's actually provided to these individuals. They're presumed innocent, right, until they are proven guilty. So let's start off with the question of funding. Kind of a broad question, but I'd love to get your thoughts. Do you think funding alone will fix the problem, right? The problem that exists right now where and I should probably frame what I mean by problem, right? It's widely known and quite, public defenders' offices are widely criticized for not providing quality representation. But then my question to you, right, is going back to the original question is, do you think funding alone will fix the problem?
Yeah, so before I answer the question, I would like to say, you said before, just to be clear to the audience, right? You said whoever cannot pay for their legal attorney or private attorney has the right to get a public defender. That's not correct, because when you look at, I mean, it isn't a law, it isn't a constitution, right? But it is like the clerk of the courts, they have to determine if someone is actually eligible for a public defender. So that means public defenders handle a lot like capital, right? Capital crimes, but also non-capital felony crimes, right? Misdemeanor crimes, juvenile cases, right? And also involuntary commitment cases. So you have a lot of different kind of criminal law areas, and not everyone is can actually have a public defender. So it is still right. It's still a right, but it has to be appointed by the clerk of courts. So just because you said the funding is if the funding is the problem, right? Just because someone has the right to get a public defender doesn't mean you should take or should accept a public defender, right? So before someone actually has to take on a public defender, that means you have to first see, can you not, get any kind of private funding, right? Do you have family, friends, a spouse, someone that could pay for your legal fees, or you can even, do you have low credit card fee that you could pay a private attorney, right? Because you have to be aware that if you pick a public defender, they cannot, and I will explain that later, why they cannot provide the best representation in your case. It's not because they're not qualified. Of course, they have to have the bar exam, right? At least in a state. Sometimes they have a couple of different states, bar exams, right? Or even different countries. But it's just the time that they have to put in for the case. They do not have that time, right? They do not have the resources. They do not have the office staff actually to do all the research, to do the investigation, to have maybe social workers, right? They do not have all these different needs, right? And resources that they need for representing someone like fully to the full extent of the law. So they are legally qualified, but they just don't have all the resources that it needs for, I have to prepare for a case, I have to look into it, I have to do research, I have to compare jurisdiction, I have to, like every case is so special, so I have to be professional and I have to, dive into this case. So it's not just, work on a case and you'll be successful. You have to dedicate a lot of time if you want to be successful, right? And in those cases, I'm sorry, in those cases that it's about freedom. It's a lot about freedom, or also losing your future, right? It's not just about civil claims or anything like that. It's like those criminal cases that determine your future in a lot of cases. So it is even more so that you need a professional representation, right, that has enough time for your case and is motivated enough, right? But with the current state, the current status quo that public defenders have, they are not getting paid enough for actually being motivated and to represent someone the best they can.
So you touched on a lot of interesting things there. I guess we'll start with the easy one. So as far as the motive, right? You mentioned to motivate them to actually work on the case. I think that has to do with the way that they're incentivized. So I know that, from my personal knowledge of how things are run here in Utah, and it may have changed, right? There isn't actually the pay, the way that they're paid is not designed to incentivize them to win cases, right? They're incentivized to finish as many cases as possible, to be done with it and move on, because they're overworked, right? They have a huge workload. Another point that you brought up is, right, the time and the energy that it requires. I don't think everybody fully understands that it really takes a ton of time to really do a good job on a criminal case. It's not just, and the attorney only has 24 hours in a day. He needs to sleep, he needs to eat, he has family, right? There's family time. So there's only so many hours in a day. So most of the heavy lifting, or we shouldn't say most, some of the heavy lifting is done by the paralegals, right? By all the different people that he has working in his office. And that costs money, right? That's expensive. It requires money to research case law, chase down videos, chase down witnesses, and so on and so forth. And then to go back to your very first point that you made about not everyone has the right to an attorney, I think right there, just to be more specific, and I used a very broad statement. So in Utah, I know that the way that it's written, and it's got to be like that, I would think, right, nationwide, and you can address this. But it's if there's a chance that you can be deprived of liberty, then you have the right to an attorney. So in Utah, right, obviously, if you have any sort of felony, automatic, you have you know what I mean, the right to counsel, right? Whether you pay for it or you have to request one and you have to jump through a bunch of hoops to show that you can't pay for one. If it's a Class A misdemeanor, same thing. Class B, and don't quote me on this, but I think with a Class B, I think there isn't the chance of being having your liberty deprived. And if I'm mistaken, right, and your liberty can be deprived, then with a Class B, you also get the right to counsel. With a Class C, there's no chance of you doing jail time, I believe. And I could be mistaken on that. I should have checked on this. But anyways, ultimately what it comes down to, right, like an infraction, you're not going to do jail time, right, under so there is no right to counsel. So it's only if you're going to be deprived of your liberty. If there's a chance that you could be deprived of your liberty, then you're entitled to counsel.
That's
Whether you,
exactly right. So if there's a risk, if there's a risk to face jail time, so that's what makes a difference, right? So not everyone who says like I cannot afford first of all, you have to prove it in the court, right? That you cannot afford one. It's not just saying that it is like that. You have to prove it, you have to show them your income statements, you have to show them bank accounts, probably also like everything that they need from you, right? And then they determine, are you eligible for a public defender or not? Is your crime serious enough, right? Are you facing jail time? And then they can appoint they will appoint someone for you. But it's, as I said, like before you say, okay, I cannot afford one, I want someone at no cost. It sounds good, but the thing is, you should really, whoever listens and whoever has to make a decision about that for a family member, they should really consider carefully if they want to do that, because it's always better to have a private attorney, right? And to negotiate the fee. Sometimes it's possible to have a flat fee, right, instead of hourly fees. That you work with someone, that they have enough staff in the office, right? They are specialized on those type of crimes. Also, not every criminal attorney does all the criminal cases, right? Because there's a big difference between capital crimes and all kind of other crimes. So, and also what I wanted to say is a lot of public defenders are at the beginning of their career. So they do not have, in the US, right? They do not have a private practice. So that's why they're public defenders. They might not have a lot of experience, right? So when they start, they want to collect experience. And that's probably not what you want when you face jail time, right? When it's about, freedom or a conviction in your case, right? It's very serious for you, for your future. So you want to consider someone who has enough experience in those type of crimes that you need representation, right? So in a public defense, you can be lucky and get someone that has experience, enough time, resources, and enough staff in the office, but it's the chances are very, very little that you get someone that is motivated enough to work for a small fee the best way in your case.
so one of the things, right, for our listeners, I think will be very valuable to know is in any state, any county, any city that you're in, right? Whatever public defender's office is there, you can actually do a request records, right? To find out exactly what that public defender's office is being paid by your city or county or state, whoever it is that pays for it. Here it's the county, right? And I would presume that would be the case in other places as well. And the reason I bring that up, right, because it's a transition into this question right here, right? So I did that. I found out how much, right, the public defender's office gets paid here in Utah County, and this was many years back. And at the time it was 3.9 million, right? It was a $3.9 million contract, and initially it seemed like a large amount, and then I started breaking it down, and I'm like, man, that's nothing, because when you start breaking it down with office space and all the paralegals and everything else, it really is just a minimal. I mean, it's just next to nothing. It's I don't even know how they do it, but I guess going back to the original question, do you think, right? Let's use this example. If we went from 4 million to 6 million, or 4 million to 8 million, right? Which this was a long time ago, so their budgets are already probably up to 6 million or 8 million. But just for the sake of our conversation, if you were to increase it, right, by 50% or double the budget that public defenders are allocated, right, on a yearly basis, do you think that alone would fix the problem? Why so, or why not?
So, no, my answer is no. Like, the funding itself can never fix, the problem, because it's a systematic problem, actually, right? It's not just a financial problem. So you have to also, resource allocation is a big topic, right? And also like increased funding, of course, but it's only like the starting point right there, right? So you have to also, as I said, you have to have enough as office staff. You have to increase like qualified legal professionals, right, that are specialized in those type of crimes, not just any kind of crimes, right? Any type of criminal law, because criminal law is just as any other areas of law, is very broad, right? So as I said, there's different violations, different felonies, different offenses, right? So you have to see if that attorney is actually experienced in the representation that you need, right? When also you would have to see reforms regarding the case overload, because what I was, at least for last year 2024 in Florida, a public defense attorney had more than 200 open cases. 200 open active cases. I mean, as a private attorney you have a lot of cases too, but it's just
Not that much.
unimaginable, right? This is like, it's just impossible, because 200, more than 200 cases active, that means there's no court decision. You still have to invest time. You have to go to jail to meet your client, or right, or you have to definitely do all these different things. You have to do research. You have to file complaints. You have to file anything to court. Still, right? You have to show up for the court appointments, the hearings. There's so much time, and they're still open. That means whenever you get as an attorney, you get two new cases. You close one, you get 2 or 3 more the same day. Like, it's impossible to ever like work through all the cases, right? And then you can imagine how much time does someone have for that kind of case when he's appointed as a public defender. Yeah.
So just to follow that train of thought there. So, but if you have more funding, right? If you double their funding, right? Which, by the way, I think it's minimal, right? We spend way more money on other stuff. You know what I mean? Like public defender's office, it wouldn't break like any county if you just increase that budget, and it would be better, right? It's in the benefit of your citizens, right? Which is that's the whole purpose of government, right? It's to protect and help and for their citizens, not to screw their citizens, right? Excuse my language here, but so my question to you though, if you have more funding, then that means you can get more experienced attorneys, and then instead of paying an attorney, say, just to use numbers, 60,000 a year, you can pay him 100,000 a year, right? So he wants to keep his job, and instead of giving him 1 paralegal, you give him 3 paralegals. So doesn't funding fix it by because you attract better quality attorneys because you're paying more, you get more people helping out.
Yeah, but
And now,
only partially. Only partially. I would say you have to definitely increase the number of public defenders, right? Paralegals or legal assistants, right? Maybe even criminal investigators, right? Who do the research, who do a lot of things, behind the scenes. It's not just about what is written in the documents, right? It's like a lot of work behind. I mean, it fixes a part of the problem, but also you have to train, your staff continuously, right? Train them, keep them, engaged in seminars, and they have to develop the skills. They have to be improving their skills, right? Because when you're stuck in a case, when you're not currently improving your skills, then you're not able to step on the next case and, actually defend someone in a totally different kind of scenario, right? You have to be, always on track with, your legal seminars and your legal improvements, right? What I would also say, but it doesn't fix the problem of the caseload, right? Because you have, the certain number of public defenders, right? Right now, you increase the numbers of the staff, right, and of public defenders, but then we have still, we have old technology sometimes, right? So we need also automation, implement technology, new technology for their offices, right? That you can say, okay, everything that is continuously, similar, right? It can be immediately saved. It can, there's electronic files, not everything has to be printed. Also the technology aspect is very important, right? Because usually, maybe a lot of listeners know a criminal case, that those files are huge, right? Because everything that has been decided in the case by, any person involved, is it a prosecutor or is it the witness, everything is printed out and put into the file. So that's also a big problem. So to not print those, to have e-files, right? To work faster in the public defender's office also.
So I actually, everything you're saying, I'm thinking money, because to get better technology, money, to
Yeah.
get, like, if the work of the caseload is too high, right? Like you said, over 200. I know that here in Utah, it was also pretty similar. Like it was close to 200. I don't know if they're over 200, but the last time I looked into that, and I got once again, I got the information, and at the time it was about 150 to 180, and right now it's probably in that range. But
Yeah.
the solution to that, right, be more attorneys. So if you have more resources, you have more attorneys, more money, you have more attorneys. Would you disagree with that? Like, I mean, I'd love to hear, because it sounds like money can fix all these problems, but maybe I'm missing something.
So money can fix a big part of the problems, right? Where you have to start with, because without the funding, without the increasing of the funding, you actually don't get qualified legal experts, and you don't get people to actually be public defenders with the right motivation, right? Because you cannot tell someone do the best job you can and make the impossible possible, but then you get paid only a part of someone who works in a big law firm or who works, for international cases, and they bill by the hour. So you cannot expect that from anyone, obviously, right? Because no one is going to do a job and gets underpaid and is highly motivated or stays in that job for a certain period of time. No one will, right? So I believe it's also systematic. You have to have a change of the system, because a reform, for example, to change the plea bargaining, right? Practices to reduce the pressure on the public defenders to accept a quick plea deal, right? Because that's what they usually do. They accept quick deals because that's another case done, right? That's another case that they can just leave, right? So what I think, the case overload is a big problem, and the payment, obviously they're underpaid, so that fixes that. You said money can fix a lot of things. It can, but also the awareness, in the public, right? That you have to there's, they play a vital role, a very crucial role in the, the society, because for a lot of people could not afford a private attorney, and they have to. We live in a, in a democratic system. They have the right to defend themselves, right, with a legal professional. So to build more awareness that it's actually not a bad thing, they are actually they're very crucial for our whole society, right? Just as we need healthcare workers in everyone in the healthcare system, we need legal professionals who are, who are there for the people, right? And to defend someone that cannot afford under any circumstances. For example, students, right? How is a student going to defend himself against, a certain offenses, right? If he cannot afford a private attorney, right? Or anyone else, or a single parent, right? Who has other obligations, or there are so many people that fit into that category. So it's not just that you say, okay, those people, it's bad luck if you cannot afford someone. It's not that easy, right? So money fixes a lot of things. The government has to put more funding into this institution.
Yeah, and we're out of time, Vera, but this has been awesome. We're gonna have to continue this conversation. But one last point that I'd like to make, that I agree with you completely, and it's a perfect transition. I wanted to end with this, is for our listeners, right, to understand that we're not advocating for criminals to get off scot-free. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a system that's designed to represent and protect people that are presumed innocent. And in our system, in our society here in the United States, a lot more people are wrongfully convicted than we actually hear about. The people that we hear about are just you know what I mean? They're just a handful of them, but there's tons of people, I believe, and then there's been research that's been independently done. A lot of people get wrongfully convicted, even more so. And I think it's actually the numbers getting worse. It's just my opinion, right? Based on what I hear and I read and so forth. But I'd love to continue this conversation, Vera. This is it's a fascinating conversation. It's very emotional, right? Because it really and you made so many great points. Like or broke, college students, they get accused of something, they're hit. Like either they get lucky and they get a public defender that cares and does a good job, or they're convicted, right? Because the system is set up like it's an efficient machine for convictions, right? So if you don't have somebody who really is going to fight for you, you're done.
Yes.
But Vera, how can everybody get a hold of you if they wanted to hire you or, yeah, for, to represent them? How can they get a hold of you?
Yes, so my law firm is like everywhere online. You can just Google Vera Zambrano&Associates, right? So we have a YouTube channel. We are, I believe, also on Instagram. My PR management is doing that. And we have like a lot of, we have English, Spanish sites that you can, get a lot of knowledge. So if you need to, you can also contact our law offices, right, per email. And yes, we're happy to help you to, offer you a consultation and then see if we can help you.
Awesome. Well, Vera, again, thank you for being on the show. I appreciate it. It was great seeing you again.
Thank you so much, Ramon.